Bringing us to, first of all, communications, wherein we have a report on our 2018 community survey results, which we do, a process we do every other year, I think Mr. Evans will tell us about.
Good evening, Council. My name is Bill Evans. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager for the City of Wilsonville. Pleasure to be presenting to you for the first time. I guess maybe because it's my first time, they allowed me a bit of a softball and allowed me to pass along some good news about the most recent findings in the 2008 community survey. This survey, the National Citizen Survey, is one administered every 2 years since 2012. And this will be a refresher for some of you who have been on council a while and understand how the survey works, but for the benefit of those who don't, there are sort of 3 pillars of community livability that this survey is tracking. The organization out of Boulder, Colorado, the National Research Center, builds this survey by gauging community satisfaction with characteristics which could be anything from parks, libraries, governance, to how the city is managing many of those assets, and also asking of the people that live in the community their participation in various items within their community. And within those 3 pillars, they're looking at information across 8 different areas of livability that they have identified through several community models: safety, mobility, natural environment, built environment, economy, recreation, education, enrichment, and community engagement. As I mentioned, this is our 4th time as a city participating in this survey. There is a statistically valid sample. It's mailed to 1,600 households. You can see the map on the right of the slide indicates the response rate. Thank you, Mark. In addition to the 392 return surveys, we also publish the survey online and allow people to opt in. The data is then blended and weighted, and the margin of error for the survey is plus or minus 4% from the 568 respondents who participated. At the risk of spoiling what is to come, I'll start by saying the news is all very positive. I wanted to exhibit some of these general scores right off the top, again to illustrate the 3 pillars. That first one is a community characteristic, is a good example. The second is an aspect of governance. The third is a participation. And in all those indications where we rate a score as 94% positive or 85% positive, what that rating means is it's a collection of the 2 most positive scores on the survey. So in the case of do you intend to remain in Wilsonville, if your answer is very likely or somewhat likely, that's considered a positive rating. So, what do we learn by participating, boy, words tonight, in the NCS? There are 2 sort of data points that we can kind of get a closer look at. One is the benchmark comparison against more than 500 communities who participate in this survey. We are able, by doing this, to gather information about Wilsonville and compare that to responses from citizens in other communities. The benchmark comparisons we should expect to be quite similar. They make it difficult for us to rate above the benchmark because for a response to be considered higher than the benchmark, it must be at least 10 percentage points higher. For it to be lower, it has to be at least 10 percentage points lower. So as you can see, and as it bears out, most of ours, our ratings are similar to the benchmark. The very encouraging news, as you can see there, is there's 11 times as many categories in which we're rated higher than the benchmark than lower. If you're anything like me, your first question is, well, what are the three? Where can we be doing better? And in this instance, I'm relieved to mention that all the areas that are sort of lower ratings are participation categories. Wilsonville residents are less likely to participate in religious or spiritual events, less likely to volunteer, less likely to watch a public meeting. So a few things.
I've been telling you that.
Yeah. So don't expect high ratings for tonight's show. Now to the better news. I don't list all of the categories here because we're going to get into some more of them in a little bit, but the ones that maybe don't get another mention later in this PowerPoint are listed there. I think a couple of them on the community characteristics side, the overall economic health, overall built environment, employment opportunities, place to work. These are all areas where resident satisfaction is beyond that in a typical community, and that's encouraging. So the second way that we can use this data, in addition to comparing our community against other communities, is to compare our community in 2018 to our community in 2016, and 2014, and 2012. I believe when this slide was presented, or no, it was actually the benchmarks. When the slide was presented 2 years ago, there were a lot more negative comparisons. There were higher comparisons. So this trend of positive is almost like sort of a bounce back. And to receive a higher rating than the previous survey, something has to be 6 percentage points higher than it was 2 years ago. There are 21 that received higher ratings than they did 2 years ago, including affordable quality housing and housing options, employment opportunities. Many results here indicating stability and progress, which is nice to see. And again, a lot of the lower ratings have to do with participation. There was a ding for street repair, lower, the percentage a lot lower than it was 2 years ago, but I believe that number was still higher than the national benchmark. So that was encouraging that even in an area where we go down, there's still, we're still primarily satisfied. But participation, volunteering went down, use of recreation centers went down, participation in clubs went down, done a favor for a neighbor went down. So we need to be a more neighborly community is the takeaway from that. You saw on an earlier slide the key focused areas, those two egg yolks that are splattered there on the left of the screen indicate those areas that are most important to residents as priorities for the next 2 years, the safety and mobility. And the darker categories indicate areas where we're higher than the national benchmark. So there's a nice little intersection there at mobility where it's a category considered of extreme import and one where our typical response is higher than the national benchmark. So that's very encouraging. Getting into the kind of the key findings, Wilsonville is a good place to live and an excellent place to raise children. I think probably a lot of us have anecdotal evidence to support that point, but it's always nice to hear data that says the same thing. 95% of respondents believe Wilsonville is an excellent or good place to live. Other sort of similar overall characteristics, the quality of life, 94%, the neighborhood, 93%. And then you see the two that are rated higher even than the national benchmark for appearance and image of the community. Great place to raise children. The highest score in any single category was a 97% there for Wilsonville as a place to raise children, and there's probably a strong correlation there between the rating on the right, which is the rating for K-12 education. People are phenomenally satisfied with the quality of their education here in Wilsonville and want to bring their kids here to raise families. And this kind of jumped out at me, in addition to the schools, things like transit service, public library, city parks, all kind of the core services, the things you want to have close to you when you move to a community, are so very well appreciated by the community at large. I mentioned that some scores are higher than benchmark, some are lower. There is the very rare category, like much higher, and our transit services rated 83%, which is much higher than the standard benchmark. And that was for you, Dwight. A nice job to see. And then just the customer service. One thing we can't always control what's happening, but we can certainly control how we respond. So to see the satisfaction with customer service provided by the city of Wilsonville is very gratifying. Second takeaway, which may not surprise anyone, is that traffic congestion in roadways are a priority issue for residents. This question has been asked every 2 years. What do you think is the biggest priority facing Wilsonville? This number has gone up to where now 41% list transportation, roads, and traffic as the highest priority. There's just an example of 2 of more than sort of 400 open-ended responses. If you, in your packets and on the website as an entire document of open-ended responses. If you don't want to take the time to look, it's just the word traffic repeated 400 times. There's very much a concern with how we're mitigating it and what we're doing. But in spite of this, and this is the encouraging news from this side, is that even with so much concern about traffic flow, you see there at 38%, our mobility scores are so high because the community is so satisfied with all of the other mobility-related opportunities, things like street repairs, sidewalk maintenance, are all many higher than the average, and overall ease of travel, that 68% is a solid number. And then this is the other part of it, is just bus and transit service, walking trails, 8 and 10 or more in each of those categories, excellent or good. And from a participation standpoint, we have the community people who are willing to use alternative transportation when it's there and provided for them. So also very, very encouraging. And finally, and this kind of relates to mobility in that residents are supporting more opportunities for healthy living. And that, it's not to say we haven't gone a long way already. Parks, recreations programs, open space, these are things that are rated in many cases higher than the national average, or the benchmark national average. As you can see from one of the sort of special topic questions we ask, essential, that 38% there on improving sidewalks and bike lanes for safer travel is probably the foremost priority of the choices we present. There, I think we're 4 that they could rank. Those are the first 2, and then the lower priority ones, which follows from my previous experience working in Park and Rec. It seems like the higher priority items are the types of things that people can kind of do by themselves, and the lower priority items are the group recreations and things you're signing up for. And there's a lot of people like to just be left to their own fitness regimen on their own time at their convenience. We do, as that last slide and a couple others indicated, focus on a few special topics. we alluded to that 41% number earlier. That number was 38% 2 years ago, and I think it was only 13% 4 years ago. So the good news is when one number goes up, the others go down. So the planning, growth, and expansion, housing and affordability, and economic development taxes all are kind of there, sort of, I guess, battling for that second spot as sort of equal in priority, but none seen as quite as concerning to the general populace. As a communicator, I find this one particularly interesting, always, to see how reliant residents are on the city providing direct information. That number for Boones Ferry Messenger has been over 80%, I believe, as long as we've been doing the survey. The number for the website has gone up. The number for the city's Facebook page has gone up. So it is very sort of essential that we continue to provide information. Of course, we maintain positive relationships with the spokesman and other media outlets to help them tell stories as well, but more and more, it's up to us to tell our story. And this is a participation question that I think is pretty interesting about people's interest in communicating with you all and with city staff. People tend to prefer online or email, and as a last resort, coming here to City Hall and speaking to people directly. So, again, just the conclusions. We live in a great place and a particularly good place to raise children. As frustrating as traffic congestion and roadways appear to be for a lot of people, people could not be more satisfied with the transit services, with trails, with open spaces, bikes. I should be more careful with my words. I could always be more satisfied, but those alternate modes are lauded and very highly rated. And residents support increasing opportunities for healthy living. How is this actionable? Well, you can smell the roses. That's what they look like this morning. We do live and work in a great place. Taking this information and moving it forward, I mentioned one of the down items was volunteerism. There's an actionable one. So is there a community awareness campaign we can build around volunteerism to get people more involved in their community? Is there a way to get people more involved in emergency preparedness? And how can these results inform council goal setting? Of course, we have all of this information in the packets and available at our fingertips to dive in a little deeper and sort of find the areas where we need to increase participation and where residents believe more progress can be made. And then, of course, finally, just continuing to listen and gauge resident satisfaction every 2 years so we don't miss another opportunity to sort of find out what's changing and where we need to continue to improve. That was it.